lecture 10, and this is the final class on Introduction to the New Testament. And we're going to do the book of Revelation. All right. Now, we want to begin, first of all, with a overview of the book. Now, Revelation combines at least three genres that we can possibly describe it in this way, although one is more popular than the other. We can say that it has the elements of a letter. All right. So it begins to the seven churches of Asia. All right. So we can say that it has the qualities or the elements of a letter. Then we can say, and we have used it in this light. So we say the New Testament has prophecy, and this is the prophetic aspect of the New Testament. So we consider the book to be prophecy, but also we consider the book to be apocalyptic literature. And that's going to be important because of how the book of Revelation is written. Now, these kinds of writing, whether it was a letter, the apocalyptic literature, or the prophetic writings, these were common in the ancient world. So we have some amount of familiarity with the key elements of each of these genres, and we can fit each of these genres, in fact, into the book of Revelation. And if we approach the book with if we approach the book with this kind of understanding that of how it is written, the form of the writing, then we can better appreciate the book, we can better understand the book. It will help us not to misunderstand the book, because the book has been battered and bruised, mutilated in the religious world, down through the centuries. All right. And because of the way the book is written, and a lot of people have shied away from the book and think that it's a book that cannot be understood. Well, in fact, it was meant to be understood. All right. So the if we can understand these key features about the book, then we can develop an understanding about is doing and what the book is saying. All right.
Okay. So we have the historical work, right?
Now, as I said again.
Go ahead. I'm just looking at your PowerPoint.
Oh, okay, yeah, right.
Because I
So
have
Revelation.
I'm working on multiple screens.
Okay, all right, okay, all right, no problem, no problem. All right. So we can read the book at in terms of the way the book is composed. All right. Now, there are three different ways that the book has been read throughout the throughout the ages and down through the history of the Christian faith and those who adhere to Christianity. So we can say, first of all, well, one of the interpretations, one of the ways that the book is read, the book is looked at as a historical work. And so they say it is basically history, and that what the book does, it relates a very distinctive message to those to whom it was written. So we can say it's a historical book because it is dealing with a message to the people at the time it was written. Okay. The second aspect of how we read the book or how the book has been read is that it can be read as an idealist or a symbolic work. And the idea here is that the book is riddled, the book is filled with universal themes. So, and that the book is written in symbolic language. And because of that, not any fault of the book itself, a number of persons, or quite a lot of persons, tend to misunderstand the symbols that are in the book. And because they misunderstand the symbols in the book and how the book is written symbolically, then
Mhm.
that has led to a misreading of the text. All right, so there's a symbolic idealist work. Now, the third way that the book is written, it is that we see that it is a futurist writing, a piece of futurist writing, so that it is what people say is that the book was written at the time, it was understood at the time it was written, but it had prophecies and predictions that began to be fulfilled at that time and would continue down throughout the Christian age. All right, and that it would point to what the last days will be and what heaven will be like and all of that. So if you look at the way the book is written, it is history because it is writing about a past to people in the time it was written. So it would be a historical book, a book about the past and about the audience of that day. We can say that the book is a present reality in the sense that there are themes in the book that are relevant to today. And so we can look at it in all its symbols as what is it saying to us today? All right. And then uh, it's a future book. It's a book about the future. It's the book about something that is to come. All right. Now, what we know about the book is that it was written to the seven churches of Asia. And in this case, it is the seven churches in Asia Minor. And that it was written during the Roman government, the time of Roman rule, Roman dominion. Um, and Rome was very hostile to the Christian faith. Rome was anti Christianity, antagonistic towards Christianity. And so, what we see at the time the book was written, if we look at chapter 1
Verse.
and verse number 10, verse 10 of chapter 1.
All right. I was in the spirit
All
of the
right.
Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice like the sound of a trumpet.
Chapter 1 and verse 10.
Yeah.
Ah, I'm sorry. Chapter 2 and verse 10, I think it is. 2 and verse 10, I'm sorry.
All right. Do not
Yeah,
fear
chapter
what
2 and
you
verse
are.
10.
Do not fear what you're about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, so that you will be tested, and you will have tribulation for 10 days. Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life.
All right. So the book is written from a background that the Roman government is very hostile to Christianity. And many of the Christians were losing their lives um, because of their Christian faith. And the idea here is that Rome had developed imperial worship, where they thought that the Roman emperors were actually gods, they were deities. And
Mhm.
so the insistence was that you should be worshiping the emperor. Now, that is opposed to Christian values because there is but one God. All right. And so, for other reasons as well, um, they thought that Christianity was nothing more than a cult. And so the Christians were suffering physically in terms of they were facing death. And so the angel writes and says, you know what? Um, some of you are going to be tried, some of you are going to be thrown in prison, some of you are going to have to lose your lives, but be faithful unto death. All right. Don't lose your faith. All right. So there are some scholars who argue um, about the time that the book was written. Um, that it was written either during the reign of Nero or during the reign of Domitian. And when we look at these, whether it is Nero or Domitian, we see that we can better understand the book in the sense that what was happening in terms of the persecution, what was happening in terms of murdering and chastising and all of that to Christians, then it gives us a picture of what Rome was like during both the periods of Domitian and Nero.
Well, well,
All right.
Nero's
Yes.
time, Nero's time is set during the First Peter's time, um, and Jude's time, uh, but I thought the Book of Revelation was written about AD 96. It's between it's between 80 and 80 96, right? Can you hear me? Fisher,
There are some in the brotherhood. There's some who say,
can you hear me?
yes.
Can you hear me?
There's some, go on.
Okay. I thought the book was
Yes, I'm hearing you.
written late. I thought the book was written later, between 80 and 80 96. Actually, because Nero
Okay, but here's the
Nero
point. Hmm.
Nero didn't live that long, because after after he burned Rome, Dominion came in. Dominion was worse than Nero.
Hmm. Yeah, but here is a point. There are some, when we come to look at the date, we will see there are some people who hold that the book was written before the destruction of Jerusalem, or as close to it as possible. And some are saying that it was written after the book, after the destruction of Jerusalem, after the destruction of Jerusalem. So there are some who hold that it is written somewhere between AD 60 something into AD 70, before the destruction of Jerusalem. And others say that it was written later, between sometime between AD 90 to AD 95. All
Yeah,
right, but
yeah,
we look at the deed. Yeah.
yeah. Because I mean, the Apostle John is the only apostle left at the time as the writer. And
Mm-hmm.
last time I checked, you don't see John mention any other apostles. Him being exiled to the Isle of Patmos,
Right.
who
Yeah.
exiled him? It was Domitian that exiled him.
Yeah. But as I said, the argument is out there. I take the position that the book was written um, somewhere between 1890 and 1895. But there are
Yeah,
others who say who have an earlier date. And even in the Brotherhood, these are two different views that we that's out there. Put it that way. All right.
okay.
So, all right. Yeah. No problem. Now, what Revelation is attempting to do in looking at the purpose of Revelation, it is about God and the world. In this way, the Roman Empire is they are what the book does is demonstrate how evil, how wicked, brutal they were, and how they were responsible for untold um, punishment, untold chastisement, untold hardship on the Christian, even to the point that Christians were being um, martyred for their faith. All right. And so, what the book of Revelation is doing is showing this is what these our Christian brethren went through. All right. Now, what it also shows, the book of Revelation, it shows the judgment of God. And what it claims about God is that God, the Christians, need to know that God controls the world, that God is sovereign. All right? Not only that he's sovereign, not only that he's the only omnipotent. Um, what Revelation shows is that God will revenge or avenge. No, God will revenge his people. He will avenge them. In other words, he will ensure that all those who seek to punish the Christians at the time, that they will face the wrath and judgment of God. All right, and God is going to ensure that his faithful believers are protected, are rescued, are secured from the forces of evil. Yes, some of them are going to die, and all of that. But God ultimately will bring victory to the Christian. That evil will never triumph over the good. All right. So that is one of the issues as we look at what kind of book and what kind of work is the book of Revelation.
So
Now,
we can sing that song, Victory is
um,
Mine.
victory is mine. Yeah. All right. And as the song says, victory in Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
because he is going to the Christian is going to ultimately triumph over their enemies. righteousness is going to triumph over sin. All right. So what Revelation is saying is that despite the ultimate victory that God has promised, there are some things that have already been secured. Yes, there are things in the future, but there are some things that are already accomplished. God has already given us the victory.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And that comes through his redeem, redeeming acts, through the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have is, it's like one person said, the war is already over. This is only mopping up operation. All right. Now, the book presents both God and his son, that is Jesus Christ, that they are the only ones worthy of worship. And what the book is it is almost like an order of worship, and they call it the liturgy. So, or the liturgy, rather, the liturgy. And so that is the way that worship is conducted, the order of worship. And so there are a lot of liturgical material that's in there demonstrating and showing the church how it should worship. So overall, overall, what you have is the different representations. I'm going to look at it later on. The different uh, revelation, the different perspectives that we come to the book with, and we will look at it, as I said, in more detail later on. The fact that this is during the Roman Empire, the Christians are being persecuted, but God is writing this letter to the church through the angel, saying that, look here, if you remain faithful, all right, um, could you just
Finish
pause
up.
the, uh,
Back
just
your
pause it a
camera
little
up
bit
just
for
a
me,
little.
please.
Back your camera up just a little bit, Fisher.
Yeah, pause it. Okay, just pause it for a little while for me, please.
Watch me now.
Ready? Yeah, all
Mm-hmm.
right, okay. Now, so what the book is doing is promising and assuring the Christian that he has, that the victory is already his, and that he should, despite the suffering, despite the affliction, despite the persecution, uh, you must continue to be faithful, and then you'll ultimately get the victory that is eternal life. All right. So that's
Well,
basically the overview of the book. Yes.
this would be very important because so many Roman slaves were Christians, and they were forced to attend false worship in the houses of those that were high ranking Roman officials. And they needed to have a clear vision that Christ
Mm-hmm.
and God are the only ones worthy to be worshiped. So not only does it deal with the imperialistic view, it deals with the view of them being able to see the difference. They had to learn to discern what true worship was versus uh, a non-restrictive worship. The non-restrictive
Forces.
worship pushed them
Yeah.
to worship anything because that was central. That was a central theme in the Roman Empire. Is that when they conquered you, you could worship whatever you wanted to worship. We've already defeated your gods, and so this
Yeah.
God of heaven.
But then you must worship. But then they say you must worship the Roman Empire because of
Right, right.
they had a cultic religion, right? All right. And of course, the Christian is going to say, no, we're not going to do that. All right. Now, let's look at some distinctive features of the book. Um, Revelation is the only New Testament book that deals primarily with prophetic events.
Mhm.
All right. Now, it is the only book of the New Testament that presents its message with symbolism. Now, that the other writers don't do it, but um, it is basically it is largely a symbolic book, and the message of victory and the message of hope comes through uh, the symbols that's there. All right. Now, if we use if we look at the American Standard Version, um, the title is The Revelation of John, and in the Greek it is apocalypsis. And what that means is an uncovering, an unveiling, a making naked. So, what the book does, the book uncovers or unveils truth through symbols, signs, imagery, and visions.
Mhm.
And it is warning the Christians that there are going to be pretty soon impending persecution facing the church, but that you ought to remain true to your faith. What I find
Mhm.
interesting is the idea that the book is about uncovering, the book is
Mhm.
about unveiling, making naked. But at the same time, there are many persons who say, I can't understand the book because of
Mhm.
those very symbols. I can't understand the book because of those very symbols. And they think that the book is so obscure that the book is we're unable to understand the book, and therefore some people just don't bother to read it. Some people just don't bother to study it. Many persons don't bother to read it or study it. And if they do, most times they come across with a message that is not intended in the book, and a message
Right.
which John did not intend. All right. So that's something that we need to keep in mind when it comes to the book.
That's
All right.
because they haven't been to the
Let's
that's because they haven't been to the hermeneutics class. They're using new hermeneutics.
yes, right, yeah. And you see, okay, we're going to look at how people, as I said, the different interpretations of the book and how those interpretations actually color what we take away from the book. All right. So now let's look at the authorship of the book. There is no question that the book was written, first of all, to the seven churches of Asia. There is no question that the person who is writing the book is recognized as being an authority. It has been the case down through the centuries that the person who wrote the book is actually the same person who wrote the book of John.
Mhm.
All right. Now, what happens here is the fact that John is the writer of the book, and there are a number of um, similarities. There are common ideas. There are common
Mhm.
um, theology. There are common um, doctrinal things. There are common vocabulary items between the book of the Gospel of John and the Revelation. And so it is we conclude that it is the same. John is the author. Now look at some of these passages. Look at chapter 1, verse 1, 11, and 19. And I will get 10 and 10.
All right. John chapter 1.
No, Revelation chapter 1,
Yeah.
verse
Revelation.
11, verse
The
1, 11,
revelation
and
of Jesus
19.
Christ. All right. Which God gave him to show to him his bondservants the things which must soon take place. And he sent communication by it, his angel to his bondservant John. Verse 11,
Mm-hmm.
saying, write in the book what you see and send it to the seven churches, to Ephesus and to Samaria and to Pergama and to Tyre and to Sardis and to Philadelphia and to Laodicea. Verse
All
19,
right. Look now. That did you read verse 19?
therefore,
Verse
write the
19.
things which ye have seen, and the things which are, and the things which are to take place after these things.
All right. Chapter 10 and verse 10 says, and I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it. Sounds familiar?
Mm-hmm.
It was sweet as honey in my mouth,
Mm-hmm.
but when I had eaten it, my stomach was made bitter. All right. We know he's not the first person to eat the words of God. All right.
Yeah,
If you look
that's
at 22 9,
that's
that's
funny because that's
Ezekiel,
like
yes.
Ezekiel. That shows the apocalyptic writing.
Yeah. All right. And it shows well, there's an allusion to Ezekiel eating the word of. That's why I said to you
Mhm.
that it sounds familiar.
Yeah.
In chapter 22 and verse 9, um, chapter 22 and verse 9,
So these points point out
it
that
says,
is written clearly to the seven churches. It's not written.
yes,
It's written for the seven churches. John is the author, and these scriptures point out and bear out the truth of the power. So 22:9 says, but he said to me, do not do that. And I am a fellow servant of yours and your brethren, the prophets, of those who heed the words of this book. Worship God. And so
all right.
we see,
Yeah, go on.
so we get to see that the word is being exposed to him. He has to write it down, and he is the conduit in which the word is presented to the churches of the seven churches in Minor Asia Minor.
Right. Um, and what it shows too is that this revelation is not John's own thinking. It's
Right.
not John's coming from John's mind. It is a revelation that is given to him that he was told to actually write. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 22 and verse 9. But he said to me, You must not do that. I am a fellow servant with you and your brothers, like and your brothers, the prophets, and with those who keep the words of this book, worship God. And verse 18 to 19, and the Spirit and the bride says, come. And he, and let the one who hears my, who hears my, who hears say, come. Yeah, you want to read it for me, please?
Yeah. Yeah, you
Verses
stop
18 and
reading. I
19.
got it. Yeah, you stop
Yeah,
reading. I
right.
got it.
Mhm.
All right. Yeah, verse 18 and 19. I
Yeah.
testify to everyone who hears the words of this prophecy's book. If anyone adds to them, God will add to him the plagues which are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of the book of this prophecy, will take away his part from the tree of life and from the holy city, which are written in this book. And so what
Okay.
it shows us the revelation of God, but it fits into John's. And tell me if I'm wrong. It fits into John's genre because John in the gospel and in first and second and third John are still teaching the supremacy of Christ, the deity of Christ,
Yes.
their relationship, and so um, when we look at 22:9, he's dealing with the fact that John was going to bow down and worship the angel, and the angel said, don't worship me. You only worship God. And I'm a like brother and like you in the sense that I serve the Most High. Uh, and I think sometimes even in the church we can give reverence to brothers as if though they're on the same level with Jesus. No, you give whom honor to whom honors due, but no one's on the level with Jesus.
You see, what the book of, as you said, if you look at the Gospel of John, first, second, and third, and Revelation, yes, it is what it is accenting is Jesus Christ, and it is He who will give us victory.
That's right.
He says, yeah. So as I said, when you look at it, you will see common ideas, you will see common features and those things coming out in the writings of John, without a doubt. Yes, um, that's the case. There's a close, as we're saying, there's a close relationship between Revelation and John's gospel and the epistles. Yeah. As I said, they have common ideas, common theology, common vocabulary. All right. So we conclude that the writer of the book of Revelation is in fact John, who wrote the gospel, first and second and third John. All right. Now let us look at the date of the writing. The date. Now, the two main proposals, right? The two main
Mhm.
proposals for the date of Revelation centers around what emperor was reigning. So there is one view that says it was written during the time of Nero,
Mhm.
before the destruction of Jerusalem, sometime between 54 and 68 AD. There are others who will say that it was written by Domitian, and that is somewhere between AD 81 and AD 96.
Mhm.
All right. Now, what is going to be important? what is crucial is the persecution of the Christians. There are key, when we look at the evidence, we're going to see something. Well, number one, there is the persecution of the Christians.
Mhm.
Um, the Christians, to where Revelation is addressed, were in fact suffering severely. They were suffering widespread persecution. They were suffering from, well, I don't want to say they're suffering from death, but some of them were actually being killed. All right. And as Christianity started to gain momentum, then the treatment would get harsher. All right. Let me see.
So
Let me hear
in
chapter
Revelations 1,
1. Yeah, go
verse
on.
9, Revelation verse 9,
Yes.
I, John, your brother and fellow partaker of the tribulation and the kingdom and preservation which are in Jesus, was on the isle called Patmos because of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus. 2:10, we know that we read that to be thy faithful unto death. Some of you should be thrown into prison.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Uh, I'll read 13. I know
Yeah, you can
where you
read.
dwell, mhm, where Satan dwells. All right.
No. Read verse 17 and 17:6 and
Okay.
24. Not 24,
Okay.
but 20 and verse 4. 17:6 and 20 and verse 4.
No problem. Yeah, because you got a list of them here. All right.
Yeah, yeah.
17:6.
But we can look at
And
the list afterward.
I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. When I saw her, I wondered greatly. Uh, 20 verse 4.
All right. So this woman, 20 and verse 4.
Then I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded because of their testimony of Jesus, because of the word of God, and those who had not worshipped the beast or his image, and had not received the mark on their foreheads and on their hand, and they came to life and reigned with Christ for
All right.
1,000 years. Wow.
Well, no. This is not a class on the book of Revelation. It's just an introduction to the books of the Bible, of the New Testament. But there is no literal 1,000-year reign. We know that. All right. And that is figurative. But something that just came to my I think I wanted to do. Uh, a number of passages in Revelation do talk about the widespread persecution. I'm going to give the passages, even though we read some. So it is chapter 1, verse 9, chapter 2, verse 10 and 13, chapter 3, verse 10, chapter 6, verse 9, chapter 16, verse 6, 17, verse 6, and, well, 18:24, 19:2, and 20 and verse 4. And all of these passages speak about the persecution that the church was going through at the time. All right. Nero's persecution of the Christians lasted from AD 64 to AD 68, but it was primarily confined to Rome, the city of Rome. All right? Now, here's another point that we need to look at. Right. Just give me a minute. Yeah. The Christians, why is my screen doing this to me? Just a minute. Come on. Just give me pause this thing a minute for a minute, please. This thing, why is this thing acting up like this?
All right, go ahead.
Right. Now, so there was the persecution by Nero, but that Nero lasted from 64 to 68 AD. All right. That's when how long his persecution lasted. The persecution of Domitian was more intense, and that ran from 95 to 96 AD.
That was the most intense part. It ran from 81. It ran from 81 to 96.
Right. So yeah. So if we look at, good point. So if you look at the persecution from Nero and Domitian, it's from 81 to 96. That's what, 15 years of persecution between two rulers. Now, the strongest evidence that the book was written from in 95, somewhere between 95 and 96 AD, is that the later writers, it comes from the later writer, because as you said, I think earlier before, there are some things that John does not mention, and the emperor worship did not take full effect in 81, but actually especially during the time of Domitian. All right. So while there are two possible dates, and I know that there's a commentary on Revelation, I think it's by McGuigan, that he takes the position that it was before the destruction of Jerusalem. As I said, brethren,
even if we read that, we just got done reading in chapter 20, verse 4, that there is some symbolism in there, but there's pure truth in there. Those that were beheaded because of their testimony. Who was beheaded because of their testimony? The Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul was beheaded because of his faith in Christ. Who beheaded him? Nero. So if it was present day time, John would write it more in a present sense, not in a past tense. He's saying, look, those that have been persecuted, those that have been suffered, those that have been brutally mistreated, have a reward in heaven. They're with the Lord. So that's important.
Yeah.
And you would also reference the fact that we know that Peter was crucified upside down. We have
Yeah,
history on that.
yeah, that's true. So we're going to take the position. Well, as I said, without being dogmatic, um, I personally hold to the view that it was written after the destruction of Jerusalem, sometime, well, I usually say AD 90, but I'm satisfied with anywhere between 95, 96, that sort of thing. But it was surely not before AD 90. That's the position I hold. All right. Now, let's look at some things that would give rise to the persecution of the Christian, and that is the aspect of emperor worship. All right. Now, in the book of Revelation, what we have is that the Christians are being pressured to worship. All right. And they were being pressured to worship the secular rulers, the emperors. Now, um, look at, I'm going to list the passages, but I'll tell you which ones I want you to read. There is Revelations
Okay.
13:4, and then 15 to 16,
Mm-hmm.
chapter 14, verse 9 to 11,
Mm-hmm.
chapter 15, verse 2, 16, verse 2, 19, verse 20, and 20 and verse 6. Now, I want us to read chapter 13, verse 4, then verses 15 to 16, and then the one in in Revelations 14. I will read
All
those
right.
two.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. They worship the dragon, because he gave his authority to the beast. They worship the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war with him?" 15 and 16.
Yeah.
And it was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast would even speak and cause as many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, the small and the great, and the rich and the poor, and the free man and the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. All right. Chapter 14, verse
All right.
9 through 11.
Yeah.
Then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worship the beast in his image and receive a mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever. They have no rest day and night. Those who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name."
All right. Um, so that what we have in the book is a very steep and deep pressure to uh, force the Christians to worship the emperor. Um, Emperor worship was wide scale during this time. All right. Now, the seeds of emperor worship were to some degree evident in the earlier Caesars. All
Mhm.
right. But it was not until Domitian that in that in the idea of imperial cult worshiping the gods uh, was introduced, and Domitian was going to make sure that it was enforced. So the first imperialist cult temple uh, and worship in Ephesus was established somewhere between, well, in AD 89 under Domitian's rule. All right. So that is the idea of it. Now, if we look at the churches, let's look now at the churches of Asia that's there. The we look at the conditions of the churches. All right. Now, look at chapter 2 and verse 13.
I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold fast my name, and did not deny my faith even in those days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who was killed among you, where Satan dwells. Mm,
All right.
mm,
Now, there's a particular Christian martyr, Antipas, who was already killed, and he was killed in Pergamum. And so much so that he is mentioned because people would have, if they didn't know, the apostle wants to make them know that here's somebody who actually lost their lives because of their faith, or lost their life because of the faith. Now, what we have is that within the church, and I'm not just talking about one now, within the different congregations that were scattered in Asia, and in this case in Smyrna, the idea of an oncoming persecution, oncoming suffering is being hinted at. So we see that in chapter 2, verse 13, where he says, Antipas of the past was martyred. And so some of you also are going to be martyred. So in chapter 2 and verse 10, it says, be faithful unto death, because the devil is going to try you. The devil is going to put you in prison. But then you just be faithful. So there is the hinting of there's a hinting of the the coming suffering that the church in Asia is going to face. Now, because of the potential penalty that they're going to get from the Roman emperor for being faithful to their faith, what was happening to the church is that many of the members were becoming spiritually stagnant. Many of the churches, they were losing their faith. They were wavering in their faith. They were compromising. Why? Because it was a means for them to escape the wrath of the Romans. But Jesus is saying through the angel, you know what? Don't follow them down that slippery slope. You
you
should
know
go.
what I was just listening, and I was listening to you in chapter 1, verse 17 is significant. When I saw him, I fell at his feet like a dead man, and he placed his right hand on me, saying, do not be afraid. I am the first and the last, the living one. And I was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and of Hades. The significance of Jesus putting his right hand on the apostle and comforting him, and then started the quotations of these churches, uh, that power and witness of the true king to fight false emperor worship. The true king is speaking. You need to pay attention to him. Uh, the phrase that I fell down at his feet like a dead man. I completely surrendered all to him. Uh, Pushes a thought right against what you're talking about, because he said, when he makes a sentence, he says, and then when you look at verse 13, he says, listen, he says, my faithful witness and my faithful one was killed among you. Uh, Brother Fisher, being in the military,
I'm hearing you.
being in the military,
Mm-hmm.
if the president came to me and he put his right hand on my shoulder and he says, I want you to move forward, soldier. I want you to fight. My faithful ones have already surrendered all and gave their best, and they died for me. They died for what we stand for. What kind of motivation would that be towards stagnation? If you were stagnant and and the most highest ranking official came to you and said, look, I know what you're going through, but you're going to have to fight. You This is what Jesus is doing in Revelations.
You see, and here's a part of the fight is not a physical fight.
Yes, sir.
Part of the fight is being faithful
Yes, sir.
to your belief, being stand up for what you believe. And then the idea is the book of Revelation is an encouraging book. It's encouragement because what it's saying that there is ultimate victory. There is ultimate reward for being faithful. But you see, because of the persecution, if you take, for instance, Ephesus had fallen away from their first love. Laodicea
Yes, sir.
was getting um, lukewarm, and so you will experience different reaction reactions to to suffering. Look, without going there, but the book of Hebrews, because of the persecution that the Christians were facing, they weren't coming to church. They weren't coming to worship.
That's right.
You see what I mean? So the book of Revelation is about the victory, the triumph that is ultimately there for the Christian. So when you look at the period of Domitian's reign, propelling, they I don't. It's not that they were incentives, but the church, in terms of I'm talking about members though, in terms of protecting themselves, it had its effect or its effect on people. They in chapter 3 2 verse 13 that we had, Antipas dies. Members of the church in Smyrna were soon to face uh, imprisonment and
Yes, sir.
potential and death as well, in chapter 2 and verse 10 that we just read. And spiritual stagnation was a problem for the church in Asia Minor. And we see that too in the church of Ephesus, Ephesians, the church of Ephesus. And we see that in terms of the church at Laodicea. All right. Now, John within the book is called upon to measure the temple. Look at chapter 11, verse 1 to 2.
You know, this gave me my second. They gave me my closing argument in my lesson, standing firm in the faith, part 2.
Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. No problem. I won't charge you for that.
No.
Look at chapter 11.
Verse 2, 1 and 2.
Yeah,
All
chapter
right.
11, verse 1 to 2.
Then there was given to me a measuring rod like a staff, and someone said, "Get up and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. Leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months."
All right. Well, without going into that, but that's I think 3.5 years, I think. And there's symbolic meanings to all of that. But
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that John is asked to measure the temple of God. And if this is a reference to the literal temple, Jewish temple, then the idea is that a date before AD 70, it would suggest something like that, that the temple was still standing when the book was written. So if the book could not have been written, according to them, in AD 90 something, because there would have been no temple to measure. All right. But now, um, the passage, that's an argument, yes, but it has its shortfalls, right? That it could be symbolic. Um, it could be symbolic, and the idea in the passage would be something metaphorical and not literal, meaning that they're doing a literal kingdom. All right. Now, let's look at not only that, but let's look at the succession of kings. Who are the kings that were um, there? And we will, once we finish this, we'll take our break. In 17,
All right.
chapter 17, verse 9 to 11.
Here
Look
is
at
the
chapter
mind.
17, verse 9 to 11.
You ready? Here is the mind which
I'm
has
ready.
wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the women sits. And they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen. One is, the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. The beast which was and is not is himself also an 8th, and is one of the 7, and he goes to destruction.
All right. Now, 8 kings are mentioned, and the one that was reigning at the time when the book was written was number 6. If this passage is taken literally, and the succession of kings begins with the first recorded emperor, an earlier date is suggested. Yet, the kings in this vision, past, present, or future, the idea is that are these kings past, present, or future in the vision? And then the idea is that while the kings aren't named here, we know who the kings are. But I'm saying when we get into the book of Revelation itself, then we will have the list of kings that are there. All right, let me just leave with one other point. The internal evidence, um, complete with the uh, testimonies and all of that, as I said, points to the fact that the book of Revelation was written during the reign of Domitian, sometime between AD 95 and 96. And that's the I don't want to sound dogmatic because it's there, but that is the date that we're using. All right. Let's take our break
Quick question.
now and we will come back at
Quick
quarter to.
comment. Quick comment.
Yeah,
Quick comment.
yes.
Do you
Yes,
remember
man.
in Ezekiel you remember in Ezekiel when God had Ezekiel go look at the temple and he described the holiest of
Yes.
holies and how they had all the
Four square.
how they had animal worship and how the outer courtroom and all the people and the false worship. And so when we were reading that about measuring the temple of God, God saying the outer courts are going to be for the nations. People are going to worship whatever they worship, but the true worship of God is a spiritual worship in his temple, which no man really can measure. Only is measured by God.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you would say that I can measure the temple and the temple is being destroyed gives us a reference of the apocalyptic. And I just thought about Ezekiel when we're reading this, how Ezekiel was used to say, look, man,
Mm-hmm.
what do y'all realize what's going on? God said, I got to get out of here.
Yes, and of course he leads the temple. But you notice though, the temple there was not the Jewish. It was pointing to something greater than that, though.
Yes, yes, yes,
In
yes.
fact, it was not yeah, it was not the literal temple at the time.
Exactly,
All right, it was not.
exactly.
It was not. So, and as I'm saying, that the Book of Revelation, that drawing and measure of the temple, could very much be metaphoric.
Yeah, it's metaphoric.
All right.
Has to be.
So, yeah,
All right,
right.
we want to
Okay,
pause.
it could be literal. Yeah, pause it and we come back at quarter to.
All right.
Ready?
Yep. Back up just a little bit. Just
All right.
there you go. Perfect.
Like
Perfect.
this?
Perfect. Perfect. You know you're animated. You like to move a lot.
All right. Yes, yes. All right. Let's now go to I'll try to stay here as best as I can. Let's go to look now at the literary genre of the book of Revelation. Now, as we said, there are distinct three different genres that are present in the book of Revelation. First of all, we say, looking at chapter 1 and verse 1, where the revelation of John, it is the apocalypse or apocalyptic, I should say. It is apocalyptic, not apocalypse, apocalyptic, right?
Yep.
Um, it is a genre that is characterized, that is apocalyptic language. It is a genre that is characterized by a couple of things. One, extensive symbolism. Two, it has visions. Uh, three, there is the strong contrast between the world as it is and the world to come. And what it
Futuristic.
expresses is the idea of victory over evil. That is the book of Revelation. We say it is an apocalyptic in its writing, or it talks about an apocalypse, yes, in the sense that there's going to be all of this destruction and whatever at the end. So when we look at the book, as I said at the big as when we said at the beginning, we can say that it is well, I just want to make sometimes I confuse the word, but I'm talking about that the book of Revelation is apocalyptic, right? Not apocalypse, apocalypt, apocalyptic. Now, the it is also prophecy. So if you look at Revelation chapter 1, verse 3, it combines with apocalyptic elements. It carries on the traditions of the Old Testament. Um, Books like Isaiah, in his writing, Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and Zechariah. It is that kind of a book. Now, um, we also say that it is an it is an epistle. Why? Because with the opening address and greeting, it functions as a circular letter to the seven churches of Asia. And we see that in chapter 1, verses 4 to 5, and verses 9 through to 11. And it includes a specific message for each of them. So let's look at chapter 2, verse 13 and verse 22. Revelation chapter 2, verse 13 and verse 22.
I know where you dwell, where Satan's throne is, and you hold my face, hold fast my name, and did not deny my faith, even in the days of Antipas, my witness, my faithful one, who was killed among you, where Satan dwelled. Verse 22.
Yeah.
Behold, I will throw her on a bed of sickness, and those who commit adultery with her into great tribulation, unless they repent of her deeds.
All right. So there's a specific message for each of them. All right. For each congregation. Now, what I want us to look at, we talked about how similar the book of Revelation is to the book of John. Now,
Mhm.
we see very, this is predominant um, in when we compare the two books. For instance, Jesus is the Word,
Mhm.
as we see in uh, John chapter 1 and verse 1 and verse 14. Some of them we won't read, I'll just list them for you. John chapter 1 and verse 1 and verse 14. We have the word mentioned again. We have the word mentioned again in chapter 1 and verse 1 of First John. And that same thing, that same terminology, that same designation is found in Revelations 19:13. And we can actually read that one, uh, Revelations
John
19:13. Mhm.
1913 or 1911?
19:13.
Babylon has fallen. All right, 1913. He is clothed with a robe dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. Mm,
All right.
mm,
Okay, so he's the word of God. He's
mm,
called Jesus is the Lamb of God in John 1:29. But he's also the Lamb of God in Revelation 5, verse 6 to 14. And in this case, there is a reference to Zechariah 12 and verse 12 to Jesus. And we see this in John 19 and verse 1. 19:37 and Revelations 1:7. 2, John 8:14 and First John 5:9. He is the faithful witness. He is called the faithful witness in Revelations 1:5, 3:14, and 19:11. Maybe that's one he wanted before. All right. There is a use of the I am sayings in John 6:35. All of the I am statements that are in John. Okay, I'm the bread of life, I'm the living water, I am the good shepherd, all of that. But he is also the I am in Revelations 1:8, in verse 17, in 21 and verse 6, in 22 and verse 13 and 16. He is called the I am. Now, Jesus is present with God from the beginning in John 1, 1 to 2, and 1 John 1 and 1. He's also in the beginning in Revelations 3:14. And of course, this passage is misabused. Well, not misabused, abused by the Jehovah's Witnesses, who say that it means that he is the first to be created. When it says the beginning of the creation of God. But it doesn't mean that. What it means is that he is the person who starts the creation of God, not that he himself is created. All right? So Jesus is referring to God as my God. The Father he calls my God in John 20 and verse 17, but he's also called my God in Revelations 3 and verse 2. So there are, like for instance, Jesus is giving us living water in John 4:10 and verse 14. And he's also doing the same thing in Revelation 7 and verse 17. So there are a number of commonalities between what he's called in the book of John and what he's called in the book of Revelation. All right. Here is something else now. His portrayal of Jewish opponents. How we looked at the Jewish opponents, he calls them false Jews in John 8:39 to 47. And they're also called false Jews in Revelations 2:9 and 3:9. Christ is linked to Asia Minor, that is between in Patmos, Isle of Patmos, and these Asia Minor would be Patmos, and that's where and Ephesus would be a part of that as well. All right, and the gospel was, of course,
Patmos is close to Ephesus.
No,
Patmos is close to Ephesus.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah, so it's the same general area. All right. Now let us look at the structure and theme of the book. All right. Revelation is logical in its sequence. It is not chronological. Now it begins and ends with physical reality. It gives us a panoramic view of heaven and the future in terms of how the book is structured. Now, there is the introduction to the book in chapter 1 to verse 3, where he's writing directly to the churches, right? Now, that is followed by a series of 3 concurrent judgments. What are those? The seals, the trumpets, and the bowls. And there's a depiction of worship in heaven. And that comes to us from chapter 4 to chapter 16. Then from chapter 17 to 22, we have the concluding declaration of triumph. It concludes with a declaration of triumph. All right. So that is how the book could be viewed in terms of its structure. Now, um, what's the theme of the book? The theme of the book is basically the triumph of Christ. And the book is about the ultimate victory of the righteous. Now, Revelation is designed, and this is very, very important in terms of how we understand the book. It is that its purpose, the main thrust of the book, the main thematic statement in the book or thematic idea in the book is that it is to comfort and support Christians under trials. Christians who were being persecuted, that they needed to recognize, they were being supported and they were comforted. And what they needed to be recognize is the assurance that all of the enemies of Christ and his kingdom, the church, would be vanquished and destroyed, and they would be rewarded. So that's the emphasis of the book. The emphasis of the book is there is victory. The Christian will be sin will be vanquished by righteous living, and righteous living will be rewarded. That's the thrust of the book of Revelation. That's the thematic idea, the dominant thread that runs throughout the book of Revelation.
You
All
mean
right.
that the
So
enemy would
if
be
we keep that
vanquished?
in mind, we're going to look at some things now that I think, yes,
You mean the enemy will be vanquished?
yes, the enemy
Christian
will be
will,
vanquished.
yeah, the enemy will be vanquished. And
Yes.
a couple with Ezekiel is also Daniel, and the the detail that's written in Revelation, apocalyptic or not, still deals with the empire that tried to rival the everlasting kingdom. The Roman Empire tried to, for centuries, rival the kingdom. And we sometimes we make a statement: if you can't beat them, join them. We get to see that later with
Mm-hmm.
Constantine.
Yeah.
And then they try to
Yeah.
impose their will from the inside.
And you see what
Because
happens too is that
Constantine,
what? Sorry. Go on.
no, go ahead. No,
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 you go ahead. I
Constantine
interrupted
is,
you. Sorry.
yeah, no. Constantine takes the other view that, okay, in order to unite, the Romans have been fighting Christianity for centuries, and they couldn't defeat it. And he took, and instead of trying to conquer them, he empowered them, and then tried to say through his empowerment that he had the right to rule them. So it was opposite of Nero and Dominion, where they used persecution to inflict fear. It was more subtle and deceptive with Constantine, because we know he didn't even get baptized.
Mm-hmm.
But he knew
All
he knew
right.
Christian faith was strong. Are you following what I'm saying?
Yeah, he knew that. Yes, I'm waiting for because I want to make a comment.
No, come on, come on.
Yeah, you said about Christians were swamped. Um, it reminds me of two things. Um, well, one, let me make the first point. Constantine realized that if he could get, as you rightly said, if he could get the Christians on his side, then it would give him continued power. And of course, um, Constantine changed Christianity, and much of what Christianity is today is as a result of his actions. When you talk about
Mhm.
the way that Nero was physically persecuting them and the way Constantine approached control, um, it reminds me of the civil rights movement here in America between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. Because Malcolm X was saying, let's fight fire with fire. Um, Martin Luther King took the other perspective. He said we can gain our social rights through persuasion, through peaceful means. How do you get, and I see a point in terms of what Constantine's approach as different from Nero's approach. All right. And that's a very insightful point. All right, now let's look at the interpretation of the book. How is the book interpreted, or how has the book been interpreted? There are as many interpretations of the book as there are people who read it. But there are four um, that I want to point out. And these interpretations, these approaches to the book determine the how what is taught from the book, how much falsehood is taught from the book. And there are four basic views. One, the futurist interpretation, the historical interpretation, the spiritual interpretation, and the preterist view. All right, now let's deal with the futurist interpretation. Those who take a futurist position say that whatever is in the book is not yet fulfilled, and therefore all of it is in the future. So, premillennialists are the most well known within this method of interpretation. It is something in the future. All right. Now, uh, there are other groups within the futuristic interpretation which assign the entire book to a time yet to come. And they call themselves literalists. And what are they doing? They're trying to make the book of Revelation literal because it is going to be some things that are going to happen in the future. All right. Now, so all of the symbols and everything that's there is in fact future. It's about the future. All right. Now, here is the idea is when it comes to the symbols, where the book of Revelation tells us what the symbol is, then it would be a false interpretation for us to say otherwise. So the seven candlesticks, the seven stars are the seven churches. I think that's what it says. Now I can't go
Mhm.
and then say the star is something else when the book has
Mhm.
already told you what it is. All right. Now, what's the problem with the futurist method of interpretation? It runs contrary to what the very text say. Look at Revelations 1 and verse 1 and 3 and Revelations 22 verse 6 and 10.
1 and 3.
Yeah, verse 1, Revelations 1, 1 and 3.
One and 3, and it says, "Blessed is he who reads, and those who hear the words of this prophecy, and heed the things which are written in it, for the time is near."
All right, verse 3.
That's verse 3.
Look at verse 1.
The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his bondservant the things which must soon take place. And he sent and communicated by his angel to his bondservant John, who testified to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, even to all that he saw.
All right, it is
Because you're
something
dealing with
that
the
will
time,
shortly come to pass.
yeah, you're dealing with the time
Say
at
that,
hand. You're, you're
yes,
dealing with
right.
the
The time
time
on
at
hand, it
hand.
is near.
It's near.
Yes.
Uh,
So
and
how
so
can it be yet in the future?
no, it can't. It can't be. It can't be. It can't be in the future. 22 and 6.
All right. Yeah.
And he said to me, "These words are faithful and true. And the Lord, the God of the spirits of the prophets, sent his angel to show his bondservant the things which must soon take place." How can it soon take place? That means it's shortly going to be done.
Yeah. Right.
Verse
And
10.
here is it now. It, yeah. That's verse 10.
And he said to me, "Do not seal up the words of this prophecy of this book, for the time is near." I,
All right.
those are just people that want to keep making up their own rules as they go. They're not really reading it. They're reading it for they're reading it like a movie. And and and
And
and I look at the I look at the premillennialists and the literalists as a movie. Um, they want to interpret the signs and the seals, to their interpretation. They don't want to see it for what it says, um, and they can't distinguish the difference
you see,
because there
and
has to be
they,
some fact.
yeah. But here's the point. If it is future, if all that is said in the book is future, then the book would become meaningless for everyone except the final generation on earth. It wouldn't have any relevance.
which
What
which we don't
if
which
it is here?
we don't even know who the final generation is.
Exactly. But you see, here's the point now. These people are suffering at the present time it was written. What encouragement is there to say, well, all of this is something going to happen in the future? All right. But so that's a futurist interpretation. The other one interpretation is called the continuous historical method. The continuous historical method. What's this one? What this method says, it interprets the book as giving an inspired history of the church from the first century to the second coming of Christ. In other words, it is about the church and the different movements in the church from the very first century right down to the second coming of Christ. So, as a continuous historical method, it talks about the Roman Catholic Church. It deals with specific popes, so they would use the symbols as specific popes. It has to do with the Protestant Reformation and all the events that followed it. All right. So it's a continuous overview of the history of the church. This method became very popular during the Protestant Reformation, and people like Matthew Henry, in his commentaries, Matthew Henry, John Calvin, Martin Luther, and others hold to this view. And in fact, this method is also shared by the Gospel Advocate Commentary on Revelation. Now, this commentary, yes, this commentary sees the work of Alexander Campbell as being specifically mentioned in the book of Revelation. All right, and you can read the book of Revelation on that, and you'll see. Now, what's the problem with this method?
I had that commentary. Didn't Shepherd write that commentary?
Yes, if you have the, well, look at it. I think he did, but look at it. Look at it. I'm sure I'm right, but I'm almost 90% that I'm right. But look at it and you will see. All right. Now, all right. Now, this method, the continuous historical method, instead of applying the things that shortly come to pass, they apply the majority of the book to a time in the distant future. From the standpoint of first century readers, the book then becomes impossible to interpret. How does the Roman Catholic Church, how does the Reformation, how does that deal with the present suffering that the readers to whom the letter was written, the churches, 7 churches of Asia, how would they, it has no relevance to them. All right. Now, and what it does, this method, it assumes that God would comfort Christians who are undergoing persecution by the foretelling of apostasy of the church and giving an inspired history of the biggest denomination. But how does that help the people to whom it was written? Because you see, you have to understand the book as the way the audience of Revelation would have understood it.
Well,
read it, learn to read it through their eyes.
What they're doing is they're moving the goalpost. They're moving the goalpost.
That's a nice way of putting it.
Yeah, because if the audience is for the future, then we're not suffering physical persecution right now. We're suffering spiritual persecution.
And it has no relevance to us.
No.
You see what I'm saying? You have to. Sorry, what?
No, go ahead.
the point is, how does how would the people, the immediate audience, interpret the book? All right. So that is the continuous historical method. That it is
And,
about the history of the church down through the ages.
and if that's the case, then why would they put it in the canon? Why would they say it's
All right.
inspired?
Yeah, but
You
because
you
it's
know
talking about,
it's
well, perhaps, perhaps they might answer that it has to do with the church's total history from first century until Jesus comes. So at whatever age you read it, it will become relevant to you. But that misses
at
the
that.
point of Revelation.
Yeah, well, we back to that 1,000-year reign again.
Right. That you see, it my point is one has to understand and view the book of Revelation the way the audience would have understood it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So now let's look at the spiritual method. This is also called the allegorical method. Sometimes it's called the idealist method or the symbolic method. And those who argue for this method make everything in Revelation spiritual, make everything in Revelation have another meaning instead of the actual meaning or the actual events that it's writing about. So within the book, through its symbols, according to this view, is the Catholic Church in general. Well, in fact, the Catholic Church um, views the book as being allegorical and how it would represent the Mass or the communion or Holy Eucharist, as they would say. All right. Now, here is the point with this. Um, there are those who would who take this view and state that Revelation is a series of 7 visions, all of which show the ongoing battle. Now, here's it now. The symbols, all of it is about the ongoing battle between good and evil, but it has no direct application to any specific event. Okay? No. I think this is the preterist method. Let me see. No, not yet. All right. Um, the idea is that the book is relevant to wherever there's a battle between good and evil. And because in our age, there is still a constant battle between good and evil, then the book of Revelations we can apply. There are certain things that are applicable to us. I don't have a problem with that necessarily. All right. Um, Now, this method, though, again, it contradicts shortly come to pass. It is called a prophecy, and what it means is that it is a foretelling. That is, this is what they argue. It's a foretelling of a future event, but there are some things that Revelation talks about at the present time. All right. Now, the last one I want us to look at is the preterist view. Now, this view has different uh, this this preterist view has different variation and shades. It is sometimes called the historical background method. We can have full preterists and partial preterist. What is this? Um, those who want to distance themselves from the term preterist, say that what they're actually doing is that there are some some of them who look at the book of Revelation in this view and they want to separate themselves. They say that the book is dealing with events that were shortly to come to pass. They were imminent when John wrote the book, and that the events in the book have already been fulfilled. So the book talks about that which is already completed, already accomplished. Preterists, that's the idea. So you have full preterists who believe that the entire book has been fulfilled, the book of Revelation. Now, for E. Wallace, in his commentary, reflects this view that whatever it says in Revelation has already been completed. Now, there are those that are called partial preterists, and they believe that all of the book has already been completed except for chapters 20 to 22, which is to be fulfilled. All right. And the idea is that most of this is a very common view that is taken by the Brotherhood, some in the Brotherhood. I don't say the Brotherhood in terms of everybody, but most people would say that some things have already happened, but there are some things that is to come. All right. Now, the preterist method, two things about them. Some who are part of this preterist method view says that the book was written describing the destruction of Jerusalem and Judaism, which was the biggest persecution of the church through AD 70. So it is the destruction of Jerusalem and Judaism before up to AD 70. The other aspect of the preterist view, another position, is that the book was written describing the downfall of the Roman Empire, which was the biggest persecution of the church after the downfall of Jerusalem. So there are some who say it is before the downfall of the Roman Catholic Church, the Roman Empire, and some say it is the destruction of Jerusalem. All right? And they take the view either it is before AD 70 or after. Now, when we look at the fact that it is about the downfall of Jerusalem, now, things that must surely come to pass, things that are at hand, things that are must shortly come to pass, it is more in line with that to say some things were completed, but some things are yet to be completed or fulfilled. Now, what are some of the objections to this method? Number one, it denies the second coming of Christ and the final judgment. Why? There are some extremists, those who go one direction and those who go another, that the only thing the full preterist view denies is that the second coming is addressed in Revelation. Those who are full preterists says that Revelation doesn't deal with that. They don't agree with that.
So for a while says that.
No,
for a while says it.
Right. So because he takes this view, right? The partial preterists take the view that Revelations 20 to 21 is describing the second coming and the judgment. All right. Now, and what it says, what they say is that we are presently living in heaven. Yeah. No. So there, as what I'm saying is that there are some who say that there's heaven and earth, and but that cannot work. It's impossible for there to be heaven and earth because this earth is going to be destroyed anyway. But the idea is that within the preterist view, there are different views. All right, and there are different extremes. You can either be a full preterist or partial preterist. But the most popular objection to that the method could only be true if there was nothing to learn from the book. In other words, it is done with, it has shortly come to pass. It has happened already. Now, if we say that that is the case, everything in Revelation is already completed, then we would say that Revelation has no meaning to us. In the same way that since the Old Testament is fulfilled, then it has no relevance to us today, and that is false. In other words, to say that everything in Revelation is completed, done, fulfilled, what relevance does that? How do I apply that now to me in this day and age? In the same way, then you'd have to argue that since the Old Testament is complete, then it has no relevance to me. It does. I don't take my doctrine from it. I don't learn from it, but I don't follow it rather, but it's there for my learning. I can apply it. All right. So that's the pitfall. That would be the pitfall of the preterist view. All right. I want to. Whoa, I'm getting through before 12 o'clock. All right. Um, we can look at the outline of the book. Um, the prologue. Um, we can look at chapters 1, verse 1 to 8. There's a preface uh, in chapters 1, 1 to 3. We have the opening of the letter. We have the prophetic sayings. Since you have the PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint will be on the LMS, let me go through it nonetheless.
Yeah,
There's
I
some
have
people
it.
might not
I'm
be.
looking at it.
All right. Okay.
So it
So
says the opening letters from chapter 1, verses 4 to 6. Prophetic sayings, chapter 1, verses 7 through 8. The vision of Christ to the seven messages, chapter 1, 9 through 3, chapter 3, verse 22. The vision of Christ, verses 9 through 20. The seven messages, chapter 2, verses 1 through chapter 3, verse 22. Section 3, the visions of heaven and the seven seals, verses chapter 4, verses 1 through chapter 8, verses 5. The vision of God, chapter 4, verses 1 through 11. The vision of the Lamb, chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. The seven seals, chapter 6, verses 8 through chapter 6, verses 1 through chapter 8, 5. And then the seven trumpets. Yeah, you have it. You have it. The benediction. You have it. The epilogue. You have it all. It's in there. Can we go back to the so what view do you hold? Are you historical? You follow along with the gospel
No,
advocate?
I'm
You
not.
follow along what view you hold?
No, no. Um, there are some things that has happened already in Revelation. All right. Um, for me, I take what I call an eclectic approach. That there are truths. When I look at the four views, I can see truths in all four. For instance, is it about the future? Yes, because it is telling me, this is how I see it, because it is telling me that um, sin will ultimately be destroyed. Now, that is something in the future. All right. Um, so I don't take a one particular view, but what the way I take it is that within these views, whether it is if you take the historical continuous view, then revelation is always going to be relevant because there's always going to be the challenge between good and evil. So I can go to the book of Revelation and learn from it. My ultimate point is Revelation was written to a specific group of people at a specific time to encourage them to remain faithful, right? And it was written telling them that persecution is going to come and they must remain faithful. And then he talks about the different uh, vantage points from which evil is going to come upon them. So for me, how I see the book is wherever there is, I wouldn't say that I take a one view. My whole point is look at the audience, the message to the audience, and I can draw from that encouragement from me. Is it that it is relevant for the church throughout the ages, as the continuous historical method says? Well, I can see that because in every age, there is going to be the challenge between good and evil. Is it that some things in Revelation have already come to pass? Yes, right? Um, there are things that actually, in terms of what was going to happen, has happened, right? Does Revelation have some things to come in the future? Yeah, but my ultimate point is this, Michael. The way I see Revelation is this: what relevance did it have to the people to whom it was written? And it was written to them through language that is symbolic, um, apocalyptic language, uh, to teach them that they must remain faithful because truth will eventually triumph. That is relevant to me. So in that way, that's how I look at the book of Revelation. I should have looked at the whole apocalyptic literature in terms of how you interpret it, because it has numerology, it has symbols, it has a victory, a fight between good and evil, and all of that. Um, so I might want to add that to the resource.
Yeah, I
And
think
it
it.
will come back
I think
because we've done some of that in Revelation. But that's the way I see it.
yeah, I think that it's important.
Yeah, go on.
I believe that I like how Revelation sums up the victory in Christ, the connection from
Mm-hmm.
man losing is positioned with the tree of life, so that at the end we gain it back through Christ. When he says these prophecies, if you take away from these prophecies, you shall be add the plagues will be added, but you also lose your place or your position with the tree of life. That symbology, that understanding, to me, it cements the final outcome of the victory of Christ. We'll be back in relationship with him in eternity. That's why you can say the destruction of sin is complete, because sin cannot reign in heaven. And you go
Right.
back to Genesis when have we let man stay in this state and be around the tree of life and sin remain? No, we can't. They got to go. But God provided a way for
Yeah.
them to come back, for us to come back. Powerful. I have for a
Yeah.
while
And
since.
I think,
Go ahead.
okay, on Revelation. Yeah. Yeah. If you, I don't have his book on Revelation, but I have I've read his book. Um, so I've read his book, so I can say that this is what his position is, and I'm sure I didn't misunderstand what he wrote. All right,
Yeah.
so that is the introduction to the New Testament. There are a lot of things that we could have gone into which we didn't, um, simply because it is an introduction to the books. In other courses, you will go into an exegetical verse by verse kind of a approach, which I um, didn't go into because that was not the objective of the course. So I hope that it was worth the while, and that it has opened up our eyes to the New Testament and prepare us for when we go deep dive into the specific books. All right. So that would be I hope that the course has been of
Oh,
benefit.
it's
All
been a
right.
benefit, been very rewarding. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end.
Yeah,
Uh,
right. Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna stop the
Yeah.
recording.
Hmm.
But I want to try something. Don't hang up yet. Don't get off the phone. Don't get off the
No, I
thing. Let
won't.
me